So, what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be rendering a pattern that resembles this grate inside this microphone, which is actually the microphone I'm using to record this video. You have been working on your metal projects in class, and we have progressed pretty well about rendering all of the shapes and metal tones inside the large objects. But sometimes these complicated patterns elude us because there's a lot of little details there that we could probably do easier if we used a repeating pattern. Now, we're not actually going to make a pattern that is inside Photoshop itself. We're going to use a pattern that we're going to paste into these areas, because if you look at this closely, whereas these horizontal lines are pretty straightforward, the vertical lines weave in and out at different spots, and in some areas they're straightforward, and some of them they start to bend pretty severely. So what we want to do is we want to make it so that this pattern is pretty simple to start with, and then we can then copy and paste one little area and then repeat it over and over again. Now, these lines, these horizontal lines, are really not a big deal. It's the vertical ones that we're concerned about. So whereas, like I said, these are bending in one direction, these are pretty straight, and these are bending in the other direction. And there's about 60 across vertically, and then the horizontal lines we'll worry about later. But we want to, since there's about 60 across vertically, and we want to be able to repeat the pattern, we only want to make about 30 paths going vertically and maybe about 5 or 6 paths going horizontally. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to go to File, New, and we're going to create a new document. In this case, we're going to make it 20 inches by 30 inches, and we want to make sure our resolution is at 300 dpi. Everything else can remain the same. Make sure that your colors are in RGB. And then we're going to hit Create, and then we have created our 20 by 30 illustration palette. Now, in order to make this pattern, we usually want to use a grid. Now, you can pull off guides for something like this, where you click and drag from the rulers and drag out guides to make a grid, but that's going to take a long time. Now, I am able to lock these guidelines to these areas on the ruler by holding down the Shift key, and then I'm able to move this and lock it to whatever position I want. And in this case, I'm making guides every 1/4 of an inch. But I really need to make the guides almost an 1/8 of an inch. So what we're going to do, and really a 1/16 in some respects. So what we're going to do is, instead of dragging out a 1/16 of an inch over and over and over again, we're going to use Photoshop's grid tool. And in Photoshop's grid tool, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to get rid of these guides. So I'm going to go View, Clear Guides. And then I'm going to go to Photoshop, and I'm going to go to Preferences, and then I want to go down to Guides, Grid, and Slices. And under here, under this dialog box, we're going to actually create our grid. Now, there's a grid line every 1 inch, meaning that there's a large segmentation of the darker line every 1 inch. But then we want to subdivide that into 1/16. Right now we have it on quarters, and we want to subdivide it into 1/16. So if we subdivide it in 1/16 and hit OK, and then go View, Show, Grid, we have our 1/16 grid with all these lines showing up that allow us to actually, if we draw paths, to snap to those particular grid lines in our illustration. This way, if we want to measure out something, we can do that rather easily because we have a grid up. So the first thing we're going to do is, I think we're going to, and I have one already done. And what I'm going to look at very quickly is how I laid it out. This is the paths that I'm going to ask you to make, but I wanted to just double check it and take a look at how I parceled out the grid lines. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 horizontal lines, and we're going to have 30 vertical lines going across. But the horizontal lines are 1/4 of an inch in distance apart from each other, and the vertical lines are about 1/8 of an inch wide. So what we're going to do is we're going to recreate that here, and we're going to draw, and what I want you to make sure that you do is I want you to make sure snap is clicked, because what snap will do is when you put down a point, it will snap it to one of these grid lines. So right now we're going to make 5 horizontal lines. We'll make them long. Start them at 1 inch, and then we are going to click and drag out them 1/4 of an inch distance from one another. Now, in order for me to do that, what I did was I selected my path with the path selection tool, and then I clicked on it to make sure that it's selected, and then I hit the option key, clicked and dragged out, and if I hold down the shift key, it locks it in the horizontal. So right now I have 1, 2, 3. I'm going to select 2. I'm going to click and drag, and now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now that I have my 5 grid lines, I want to start making my weaved in and out vertical wire. So I'm going to go back to my pen tool again, and I am going to click on 2 points or 1/16 of an inch above where I want to start. And now we're going to start weaving it in and out of our horizontal wires. So I'm going to go every 2 points and I'm going to click out and pull a curve every 1/16 of an inch. And what I've created is a pretty clear-cut curve that is equal on either side. So it looks like it's weaving in and out. So what we want to do is we want to create about 30 of these going across this whole way. But because we're creating 30 of them, we don't want to have to do exactly that 30 times, nor do we have to. What we want to do is we want to click out and again, just like we did with these lines, we want to click and drag out this particular curved line. And we do that again by holding down the option key using the path selection tool, and we click and drag. Whoops, let's try it again. Click and drag. And I'm leaving 1/16 of a space betwixt each line. So and this will make sense later on. So what we want to do is we want to again click and, well, before we keep clicking and dragging, there's something that we want to do. We want to make sure that as we click and drag this out, we reduce this line, I would say by 5%. I tried at 5% at other times. Maybe we want to try it at like 7 or 8%. Let's try it at 8%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform Path, And I'm going to take this path and I want to reduce the width of this by 8%. Now I'm going to go up here to the width field, and I'm going to reduce it by 8%. So that means that I want to type in 92. So if I hit 92, that's taking away 8%. I hit return twice, and now I have reduced this by 8%. So it's just a little bit smaller than this one. And as I keep continually going and copying this, I will reduce the next one by 8% as well. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to option click, drag out another one. I'm going to make sure it's centered, leaving 1/16 of a space here, and I'm going to make sure it's centered between these 1/8 of a space so that these center points are on this center grid line. And I'm leaving this gap in between each one. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to transform it. So I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform, and I'm going to reduce the width by 92% again. Hit return twice. So now this one is a little smaller than this one, which is a little smaller than this one. So what I want you to do is I want you to continue to do this. Click drag out using the option key, and you want to also hold down the shift key, which will lock it whichever way you're dragging it. And then after that, and you've made your duplicate, you go to Free Transform Path and reduce it again by 92%. And I want you to continue to do that until you've made 30 or 32 of them. I think that 30 will be enough. If you have to make a few more, then go right ahead. We will stop the video there and we will pick it back up again once we have gotten all of these 32 or 30 down on the page. And I will see you shortly. Give it a try and we'll see how you do.